Okay. Allow me to introduce Katelyn Bowden. She is a hacker, an activist, and a community manager. She's been a member of the esteemed hacker collective called the Cult of the Dead Cow since 2020. Previously, Katelyn was the founder and CEO of Badass, which is battling against demeaning and abusive selfies. And there's an S that I'm missing on that. I apologize, Katelyn. I hope you can educate us after that. An organization that supported survivors of non-consensual pornography. Currently, Katelyn is the CMO and the co-founder of the Veilid, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Katelyn, project, and a board member of the Veilid Foundation, which supports privacy and personal autonomy in communication suites. So, Katelyn, thank you so much for your time, and we'll go ahead and turn the screen over to you. All right. Can we turn the screen over to Katelyn?
Just let me know when y'all can see me or hear me.
We can see and hear you.
All right. Hi. Nice to be here with y'all. Here, I'm going to share my screen because I have a little, PowerPoint to go over with y'all. This is my first time doing this, so here's hoping. Computers are hard. Luckily, looks like I am. All right. All right, so today we are going to be talking about how your privacy matters and how to take it back, how social media has caused the privacy apathy epidemic, and how we are going to start working to take control of our data. Can everybody see my screen? Are we good? I think I'm doing this right. There we go.
I can see your screen, yes.
Fantastic, thank you. All right. So I know that Chris had already done a quick intro for me, but in case we hadn't discussed it, my name is Katelyn Bowden. It originally was Medusa, but we've since started pronouncing the 4 simply because I don't speak Leet. There's no Leet here. We're all the same. I had founded the Anti-Image Abuse, which includes non-consensual pornography, also known as revenge porn, organization Badass in 2018. And that is kind of a long acronym, so no worries about forgetting the S. It stood for Battling Against Demeaning and Abusive Selfie Sharing. And during Badass's existence, we helped to get image abuse laws in 17 states, which criminalized the behavior. We organized and assisted thousands of victims and used that to create peer support for each other. It's a lot easier to go through this kind of trauma when you have other people around you that have been through the same thing and aren't judging you for it. And our whole goal was to empower victims, teach them the tech they need to start, taking control of their images and to fight back. And it got a lot done. I worked with social media companies and law enforcement to prevent and respond to image-based privacy violations. I actually did go and work and fly out to Facebook and Twitter and things like that to, help them refine their methods of handling that sort of thing. In 2020, I was invited to join the world's oldest hacktivist org, the Cult of the Dead Cow. They've, spent, it's been 40 years now. They spent 40 years, doing their best to change the world through various ways and unconventional things, whether that is releasing new software or just making big statements, using the media to change, to bring attention to things that people are ignoring, and doing all sorts of things to make the world a little bit better place. And lately, I've been working with CDC members to build privacy-focused communication protocols, specifically Veilid. But I'm not here to really talk about Veilid, although I will get into it a little bit. More so, this is an overall user end privacy discussion about what is going on with your data, how it's being misused, the various ways that companies are harming us by collecting, storing, and selling our data, and some of the ways that you can, so easy steps that you can take to prevent that data from getting out there into the ether. So before we get this thing started, it's the terms of service, because I believe we should all be able to opt in with informed consent as to what we're about to get into. When I talk about things, I'm going to say a lot of big sweeping statements and understand that there are exceptions to every rule. Yes, not every single corporation is a bad guy here. They're not all collecting your data. Sometimes you aren't the product, but most of the time, yeah, that's how that goes. In this talk, I will be saying some awful things about some corporations by name. I am not doing this to harm them. I'm not doing this because I just want them to go out of business. I'm doing this to simply educate about their practices. And it is not related to the absolute disgust I feel about the way that they are handling privacy, although that does exist, I promise. And there are some trigger warnings. I swear a lot. So there is some language. There is a brief mention of, abortion care. And I do have kind of a doomer attitude regarding the potential consequences of our current state of the internet. I am really afraid of what's to come if we continue allowing the data economy to thrive. And I am going to do my best not to make that a contagious, oh, the world is ending, this is all terrible sort of thing, and have some optimism here, I promise. So, started off big. We've all heard this phrase before. If you aren't paying for a website or service, you are the product. Understanding how you're being monetized is key to informed consent. Being able to make those decisions as to whether or not you are willing to trade your data and little bits of your privacy in order to use a service, and how they're using that data is kind of key when it comes to understanding, what you're participating in. So we're going to go over that a little bit. So I talk a lot about the data economy, and what exactly does that mean? So on Wikipedia, the data economy is defined as a global digital ecosystem in which data is gathered, organized, and exchanged by a network of companies, individuals, and institutions to create economic value. Now, in normal terms, that's just basically corporations are monetizing your internet behavior and private data. They are taking that and they are selling it, or they're using it in some way, shape, or form to monetize you. You are the product. So when you sign up for a new service or a website, oftentimes you're going to see, a privacy policy and a terms of service. And these are what they say. Data that we collect is used for advertising. We collect data to maximize user experience. And we take your privacy seriously. If you've ever been on hold with a company and you hear that robotic voice in your ear saying, your call is very important to us. Your wait time is 3 hours and 25 minutes. And you know in your head that your call is not that important to them, or else they would be doing a much better job of answering it in a timely manner. When they say that they take your privacy seriously, all too often, that means about as much as we value your call. They take our privacy seriously as long as it benefits them. What they actually mean by all of this is, that most companies are more than happy to sell whatever data they collect to whomever is willing to buy it. Doesn't really matter if that company is using it for good, if they're using it for evil. It doesn't matter what they're using that data for. Many companies are solely in it for the capitalism of it all. So the more money they're able to make, the more data they're happy to collect and sell. We attract more advertisers by using your most intimate data to serve you ads. Anyone that has used a social media service before has noticed, they get the most random specific ads sometimes for things that they haven't necessarily, shared with that page. Women who have just discovered they're pregnant sometimes will start getting ads immediately for, baby formula and diapers and things like that. And sometimes that can be really traumatic, especially if, there's, a loss of a pregnancy or things like that. So that, they're making sure that all of their ads are hitting exactly who would want to see them or who they believe would want to see them without taking into account an individual's personal reaction. And of course, your privacy is important, but not nearly as important as our profits. But think of the shareholders. Anyway, in 2023, over $247 billion was exchanged within the data economy. And that is only the stuff we know about. That is only the legitimate, purchases made by one legitimate corporation to another. There is a second data economy that exists underground, where people who have, gained that data in illegal or, not acceptable ways, forms, whether that's through hacking or phishing or scraping or, accessing websites that they aren't supposed to be accessing. They sell that data on a black market, and that, is not accounted for in this $247 billion. So needless to say, this is a very booming economy. This is a moneymaker, and that is why it continues to happen. And it's only getting worse as time goes on. So who is collecting your data? On the left side of the screen, we have a list here. The top three, in my opinion, of the worst are Facebook, Google, and Amazon. They collect pretty much everything you do inside or outside of their apps. By Facebook, I mean the whole Meta corporation, because that would include also Instagram and Facebook Messenger, which is that's a rabbit hole. They collect pretty much every step you make on the internet, and they sell that data. Or they use it to make sure that you are getting very, very targeted ads, or a little bit of both. Facebook has been known to do both. In particular, both, sell your data as, a bonus for people that would like to advertise with them, as well as selling it again on, a different market to people who are looking to, gain information about elections or people who want to market certain things. But they're not the only ones that are doing it. It's also healthcare companies. It's your car. It's Snapchat. It's X. It's Bath and Body Works, or pretty much every website that you would go and shop on. Every time you accept those cookies, it's giving a little bit of your privacy away. LinkedIn is another really bad one. They collect a lot of information and they give it away and sell it. Your grocery store, every time you swipe that card that has your name on it, you get, that 10% off gasoline, but you're trading for it. Spotify, Netflix, the list can go on and on. I only have an hour to speak, so I don't have time to sit here and list every single website that is collecting, storing, and or selling your data. It's everywhere. And on the right here, we have data brokers, the people that they're selling it to. You may have heard of a couple of these: Experian, Equifax, Oracle, Epsilon, Spokio, CareLogic, Verisk, TransUnion, et cetera, ad nauseum. There's always brand new ones popping up because, as we see, this is a booming economy. And the ones that do exist are constantly changing their name. The minute the people start finding out that they are data brokers, oftentimes they do a complete rebranding. And some of these, take that data and they use it to change your credit score. They use it to decide whether or not you could get a car, that sort of thing. Some of them are collecting it for political reasons. Some are collecting it for medical studies. Some collect it and use it for AI to build, AI and machine learning tools. And some of them collect it solely to have you pay to remove it. And that's kind of weird and gross. And that's a whole nother side of the data economy that is very dark, but it is one that exists. They basically say, hey, we're going to make it very easy for anyone to dox you unless you give us $17.99 a month. And that's always a little dangerous. If you notice, you don't know as nearly as many companies on the right side as you do on the left. These are the private ones that they lurk in the shadows to collect and store your data. So, what data is collected and how does that affect me? Even what we would see as the most innocuous data is useful and valuable to someone. For instance, you may not care that, say, your Spotify listening habits have been leaked out and they are being sold to a company. But what you don't realize is that through those listening habits, they may be able to judge your gender, your age, your political affiliations, your race. They may be able to judge where you live in the country, especially if you have your location turned on while using Spotify. They would be able to tell if you, possibly they could be able to tell your sexuality, what gender you identify as, also your mood on any given day. If you are listening to more depressed music, they may, sell that data to advertisers who are going to, advertise depressing things to you, thinking that you might be more willing to buy those because of the mood that you're in. We don't think of that data as necessarily being something that can be held against us, but when it's part of a much larger, picture, then we can't really judge what they're doing with that larger picture. Not to mention, you're making, every time you're using these corporations that are selling and storing and misusing your data, you're, supporting them. Not to mention, if they're just storing it, they are, creating a risk for you, the user. Simply by storing it, there is creating the possibility of a breach. And that is always, something you want to avoid whenever possible, obviously. You never want your data to end up in breaches. It's just not good. And with the ever-changing landscape of geopolitics and capitalism, the data that they collect on you can be used against you legally or have devastating consequences for the future. One scenario that really scares me is the possibility of our data, on social media, our behavior on social media, and how it could affect generations to come. We are looking at a world where someday our kids may be denied health insurance because we joined a Facebook group, for people who are depressed so that they can get some support, or people struggling with cancer. Your pre-existing conditions get, if that data is out, that gets passed down into the, data sets of the people in your future. So that's really scary. That someday, our children's children may be seeing the effects of the lack of privacy that we currently have. And I don't want to hear, this is the biggest argument against privacy, that you don't need it if you have nothing to hide. Because the fact is, we all have something to hide. Maybe you're not doing anything wrong, you're not doing anything illegal, but you're still doing things that aren't anyone's business. I don't need to know everything about you. You don't need to know everything about me. It's simply a matter of consent and, allowing people to discover things about you as you want them to. The fact is, we all have something to hide, and that is simply just who we are, our existence. Not everything is meant to be known by everybody. Here's a really good example of when I mentioned the geopolitical climate constantly changing, of a recent incident that happened where there was, in my opinion, an invasion of privacy. In 2022, and this is before the Supreme Court had overturned Roe versus Wade, Facebook turned over messages between a mother and daughter, wherein the mother had helped her 17-year-old daughter acquire an abortion. In Kansas, where the two live, abortions were only allowed until 20 weeks. And in the evidence that it was collected, it was unclear how far into the pregnancy the daughter was. And both mother and daughter have been charged and were found guilty for violating the state's abortion laws. Now, we understand that law enforcement sends warrants out to social media companies. That, is fine, especially if there is, a crime being committed that is harming other people, things, that are exploitation based or harassment. But they had sent a warrant for a completely unrelated case, and Facebook handed them everything. They only discovered about the possible, the possible violation of the state's abortion laws because they had received the entire data set of the conversations between the mother and daughter. So that to me is a huge privacy violation. They were not investigating that specific crime, yet they were given more than enough information to create a case based on what Facebook gave them, because Facebook was giving them literally the keys to everything. I also want to mention that Facebook Messenger, I said it's a whole rabbit hole and I won't get into it, but they do store plain text. Everything is stored in plain text on their servers. That means that people that work there can read it. Law enforcement can read it. They are only end-to-end encrypted. If both parties have gone through the process of turning that conversation into a quote-unquote secret conversation, they advertise themselves as end-to-end encrypted, but they actually make it really kind of difficult to access that end-to-end encryption. So, yeah, they will happily turn over much more information than necessary when asked. Now, simply storing data creates risks for users. As I mentioned, breaches happen all the time. We hear about a new one in the news every single day. Just storing that data and not storing it responsibly is a huge violation of the privacy contract between a user and a company. And, we see that on a day-to-day basis in the news. Now, I made this animation and it was working earlier. Here we go. Yeah, these are all headlines from like the past month or so. I didn't even scroll back too far to grab these. As we see, there's a lot of breaches happening on a very common everyday basis. And that's every bit of data. We recently had one, and I don't believe I have the headline on here, where the social security numbers of millions of Americans were exposed. And that's a really important, private piece of data that should not be floating out there. At this point, it has become, kind of useless as a secure method of knowing if somebody is the person they say they are, because of how many times that information has been publicly leaked. And nothing is safe. It's not like this is, limited to one sector or another. It's not just in retail. It's not just in social media, as we saw there. It's in medical companies. That's medical records. It's in software that is used for students in schools. It's banking records. It's everything. Every tiny little bit of data helps build a larger picture, which is then sold, and then eventually we don't have anything left that is private. And honestly, just thinking about all of this, it does create a sense of doomerism. I know I have it, where you almost want to feel apathetic. Like, what's the point in fighting back? What's the point in trying to regain privacy because everything's lost, everything's out there? It's already been sold. There's already a huge dossier on me that, has been sold and resold from this company to that one. And it creates a sense of empathy. And that is how they would like it. If we feel like it's too overwhelming to start, taking back our privacy and regaining control of our data, then we don't do it. We keep on handing over tidbits of information. They keep on making money. It's what we would call a dark pattern. And that is where they make it very, very difficult to tell exactly what a company is doing behind the scenes. And that apathy is built in. They want us to feel helpless. They want us to feel overwhelmed by how much data is out there. They want us to feel like there's nothing we can do, because there are plenty of things we can do, and they just don't want to do that because it would cut into their profits. And once again, we have to think of the shareholders. In my opinion, privacy should not have a paywall. You should not have to pay to use private, software. You should not have to pay to keep your, data secure. Period. You shouldn't. It also shouldn't require a computer science degree. Privacy has, often been pretty inaccessible. The media has done a really great job of painting Tor as the dark web. They make it so that most normal people are afraid to use these privacy tools. They make it so that we believe, only criminals use those sorts of things. Not to mention, Tor hasn't exactly made their software user-friendly. It's very slow and it's difficult to use. And, if I gave a friend of mine who doesn't understand computers at all an Onion, address to go to, she would be very confused. He or she would be lost. They make it so that there is a technological knowledge hurdle. So I feel that, more privacy things need to be user focused. And the user experience shouldn't be an afterthought. Privacy should be easy and accessible to everyone. It should be welcoming. One of the reasons that, people are so willing to trade over their data and their information to places like Facebook and Google and Amazon is because they have made it so very easy to use and sign up for. They make it, click, upload a photo, enter your name, email address, and suddenly you have a profile, and suddenly you can connect to everyone you ever met in high school and beyond. Or a Google search. We don't talk about search engines anymore. We just say, let's Google it. And Amazon, everyone uses it at this point. It is extremely easy to use. And they have made that software, that user experience, so welcoming and so simple that it doesn't feel like, it doesn't feel intimidating at all. Whereas a lot of privacy-focused apps historically have been much more intimidating. So it's time to start opting out. If you're not opting out, you are actively contributing to the data economy. And I don't know about you, but I'm really sick of seeing these billionaires continue to get richer by squeezing us for everything that we have. And it's time to opt out. So end-to-end encryption. We love end-to-end encryption. A lot of people, don't necessarily know what that means. If you're not in tech, as a field of study or, as a job, you may not understand how end-to-end encryption works. And basically what it is no one can read the contents of messages other than the people you permit to read the messages. You, the person you send it to, are the only people that are able to read the contents. Between your phone and their phone, the information that is contained within those messages is turned into a secret code that only their phone can unlock. And there's a lot more to this. I'm not going to, sit here and get into the deeply technical, terms. People don't need to know the difference between SHA-256 and, poly-cha-cha-20, or how many times that information is encrypted. The fact is that end-to-end encryption should be the very base of what we should expect from any, peer-to-peer company. Any company where you're talking to another person, end-to-end encryption should be the baseline of what we expect. And the fact is, so many don't have it. Whether or not they say they have it, they don't necessarily. I remember there was a time when Telegram was trying to claim end-to-end encryption, and we have since discovered that was a lie. Facebook, they offer end-to-end encryption in their messenger program, but like I said, they make it rather difficult to know that Most of your messages are not end-to-end encrypted unless you go through the steps to make them so. So from now on, when signing up for a service that lets you talk to someone else, consider end-to-end encryption to be the baseline of what you expect. You don't want people that are, working at the company, reading those messages, gaining information from them, taking that data, selling it, storing it, using it, because that is yours. That's your private data. These are the ways that we can start opting out. These are simple things that we can do. These are not things that cost a ton of time, energy, or money. These are just some ideas of ways that we can start, taking that control back. And the first thing is, mentally, just realizing the value of your privacy and treating it accordingly. You are worth hundreds of dollars to any given corporation. You're worth a lot more than that, obviously, but realize that they look at you and they see so much profit based on how much data they can get out of you. Realize that everything that you do on the internet has value, and you want to treat it as such. Don't give your clicks, your time, your energy, and your data to companies that historically you would not want to trust with that sort of thing. You want to go through your phone and you want to check your app permissions pretty frequently, because sometimes they change, especially when there are updates. Make sure, that some app that you are using to make a list of your groceries is not accessing your microphone, for instance, or not able to access the devices around you. These are just simple things we can do as part of a privacy checkup that we should be doing regularly. Definitely go through each individual app and see what all they're accessing as far as your data. Also, taking the time to recognize the trade-off. Is connecting to my high school classmates on Facebook worth the loss of the privacy that I am experiencing due to using the app? And I'll tell you a little bit about me personally. Okay, I love Bath and Body Works candles. Like, I love them. They're, in my opinion, the best candles. And so I am more than happy to allow them to spam my email with, letting me know when candles go on sale, because I would like to know when I can buy them. But I don't need to see 500 marketing emails from a sticker company that I ordered from 3 years ago that, wants to send out 2 emails a day about whatever sale they have, not to mention the owner's weird political emails. And understanding that trade-off, that data trade-off and what you are getting yourself into, and deciding whether or not that's something that you are willing to subscribe to, because we are all about informed consent, and knowledge about what you're giving away by using a product is a part of that. One trick that I do use, and I recommend, that's not that hard, but it is a really easy way to, see who is selling your data and to whom, is to use different email addresses for different purposes. Use one specific email address for shopping, use one for social media, one for work, and you want to go through and opt out of the marketing messages you don't want. Most email messages have that little opt out button on the bottom. Sometimes they make it really complicated and, have a bunch of pop-ups that say, are you sure you want to opt out? And some of them even have really weird wording that says, are you sure you don't want to opt out? Just pay attention and, go through the process of each individual one. The different email address is really nice because it is able to compartmentalize your various habits, and it stops, like, if there's a breach, it doesn't affect every aspect of your life. Like, they're not suddenly able to access, say, your work email, or possibly your social media accounts, just because that account that you signed up for so you could buy a candle, it was breached. They're not able to access everything else. Always use a password manager. These are relatively easy. There's a lot of free ones. Most of the ones that are really going to be secure and take care of you might cost a little bit. I believe at this point, Apple has one that is built into their devices. But either way, what it does is create a comprehensive password that is long, and it contains a random string of numbers, letters, and symbols that makes it really hard to crack. It also makes sure that you're not reusing passwords. That is the biggest no. Don't reuse passwords. You also want to look at decentralized, and privacy-focused alternatives to services that you already use. And I'm going to get into that in a moment. I actually made a list of, some other options, and we'll get into that. Also, always read the terms of service and the privacy policy. I know it's very long. It's very dry. It's not a great read. It's not exciting, but it's best to know and make informed decisions when it comes to signing up for anything online. The last thing you want to do is sign up for something and then realize that there are a whole lot of downsides that you didn't realize. One thing that I found really interesting, I saw this a few years ago, was when my husband and I got married. We had signed up and made an Amazon wish list. And at the time, we had not purchased an apartment together. We were still living, on other sides of the country. And so we had them send the presents that were purchased for us to his mother's house. And many of them arrived at his mother's house in my name. And that is the only time I have ever used his mother's house as a mailing address. And to this day, random companies will send me, junk email to his mother's house in my name. And every single time I'm like, wow, Amazon made a lot more money off of me beyond just the presents people bought, because they were happy to sell that data, that address data, that advertising data to various companies. About once a week, she gets a piece of mail or two from me. And it's all junk. It's all things that I'm not interested in. But still, that data, of creating a wish list for a wedding, I was not aware that I would still be seeing the consequences of how they mishandled that data, 5 years later. So always keep that in mind, and make sure you're reading the terms of service and the privacy policies before you share data. Many times they give you the option to opt out of them selling your data to another company to send you promotional emails that you may be interested in. All right, so here's a list of some more privacy-focused and or decentralized alternatives to services we commonly use. Also, I should probably explain, decentralized means that it is not, that all the data is not stored on one server, making it easy for a breach to happen and for people to access that data. Decentralized means that the data is stored all over the place, and so it is much more difficult for a bad actor to gain access to all that data at once to create a large picture. It is not saying that it is always 100% more private, but it does make it much easier to, or much more difficult for breaches to happen that would be devastating. It's kind of that phrase, don't put all of your eggs in one basket. It's that. Decentralization is putting your eggs in a whole bunch of baskets. Whereas centralized sites and apps are putting them all in one, making it much easier to lose that data. So some social media alternatives would be Mastodon, Blue Sky, Pixel Fed, which I just recently found out about, and it is a image sharing social media similar to Instagram using the AT protocol built by Blue Sky. They've also announced Flashes, which is going to be similar to a TikTok or an Instagram sort of thing that is also going to be built in the AT protocol. Personally, I really like Blue Sky. It really does feel like old Twitter. And they are working to decentralize and start, distributing their servers to other places. They also have open sourced their code, which is a really big deal. Open sourcing your code means that people can actually go and look and see how that data is being stored, see what data is being collected and what it's being used for. So personally, when I'm talking about privacy-focused projects, I do like to know that something is open source, that the code is available to me, not that I can read most of it, but it is there, and that they are allowing people to go and, review the privacy aspects of each individual thing. So I do recommend Blue Sky. Mastodon in my opinion, is great in theory. I love the idea of Mastodon. However, the implementation is not great, especially if you're a mobile user, which I know that most people use for social media. Mastodon has not made their, user experience great for mobile users at all. It's slow, it's difficult, they make you log in repeatedly. It's very confusing, even for somebody that understands computers. And the apps tend to crash a lot. And it's been a while since I have tried, but I haven't heard it's gotten much better. The downside with Mastodon as well is that the person that runs your instance is able to see the messages that you are exchanging with other people. So as long as you trust the person that is running the instance that you are choosing to use, that's up to you. But it is a great option for building smaller communities, especially if you are looking for a small community of people that you already know and trust. And if you're using a desktop computer, I've heard it's wonderful. I never use my desktop. So yeah, that's the downside. I don't know much about Pixel Fed and Flashes, but I will, be checking those out very soon. You can also use privacy-focused email and communication services. There's Proton Mail. That is the classic, privacy-focused email. I understand that lately there's been some controversies happening. I actually haven't kept up on it, but I don't believe it has anything to do with the actual privacy or, security of the app itself. And, as far as I know, they are kind of the top tier when it comes to privacy. For email services. Tutanota is the same. They are great about making sure that your information is stored, everything is end-to-end encrypted, that your information is stored securely, my bad, and everything is end-to-end encrypted, and that they collect as little information as possible. Signal is wonderful for peer-to-peer communications, and they have come a long way. Just this past year, they made it so that you didn't have to exchange your phone number in order to, connect with somebody on Signal, which was a huge step. And it's something that I know activists and advocates have been telling them forever that they need to do. So was really happy to see that happen. And they do open source, which I think is great. I have one big concern about Signal, and that is, if you don't know, like I said before, if you don't see how a product or service is making money, then you are the product. And as of right now, Signal has run into a huge funding issue. They have an overhead of about $55 million per year, and they have no income. So if you love Signal, if you want to continue using Signal, highly recommend you go and donate to them, because I know that I would not like to see their various options as far as making, staying afloat. And I use Signal all the time. I have a ton of group chats, and I really hope that they figure out some funding soon or do a subscription service, something like that. I'd be more than happy to pay for it. Coming soon, it is in beta as of right now, but we have Veilid Chat, and that is also going to be a peer-to-peer messaging platform, very similar to Signal. However, biggest difference is that you don't have to give any information because we don't want it. We don't store it. We, as in Veilid, are a step further than decentralized. We are actually distributed, which means there are no servers. Each person that is using the service stores a little bit of data, and it's all mixed up so nobody can see anything that they are storing. But we have a long way to go before we reach the capabilities of Signal. That is for sure. As right now we are in beta, we are hoping that in the next year we can, do a more widespread release. But as of right now, it is simply one-on-one communications with no images, no GIFs, no video, no voice chat, simply, text. And we've got a little bit to work on. But because we are not getting paid, this is a completely nonprofit project. This is solely a, what we believe is common good. Things don't get done so quickly because we all have to keep, our day jobs. But also there is never any danger of us, needing to go and scramble to find funding. So that is something that we hope starts taking off. And that is, the idea of building things simply for the sake of building them. So shameless plug right there. And that's something to look forward to in the future. There are services that you can opt out. And when I say opt out, means they remove a lot of your information from the data brokers, from, search engine results. I know Delete Me has historically been the one that we recommended. I understand that there have been more security concerns the past year. And to be honest, I'm not as up to date on those, but I know a lot of people who are extremely privacy focused who still use the service, and they recommended it. There's also one called Incogni, which does the same thing as Delete Me. But I believe they are also open source, which is, like I said, a positive. They let you know how they're doing the things that they're doing. And those, services make sure that only the data you want out there is out there. Rather than Googling, you can use DuckDuckGo. That's a really easy switch. DuckDuckGo actually has way better results than Google because Google has really gone the route of enshittification lately. They're serving up more ads than they are actual search results. And DuckDuckGo is still serving up the same old, I want to know this. Here is the answer to this. They haven't implemented some weird AI that tries to answer it and is usually wrong. And they aren't serving up a ton of ads. They also don't track you like in the way that Google does. So highly recommend DuckDuckGo rather than Google. Just making that switch alone is denying the data economy so much information. And finally, rather than using, traditional payment processors like PayPal or Stripe, you can also get into cryptocurrencies. I know that a lot of privacy-focused people have gone that route. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on cryptocurrencies. Honestly, that is not something that I have delved into. Highly recommend you do your research before you invest in any of those. But I know that they are available for people that want to be privacy focused, and that there are some that are solely for making privacy focused, exchanges. So that's one you would have to do your own research on. I don't want to give you wrong information here. So this is how you personally can get involved in helping the world become a more privacy-focused place. You can call your representatives and encourage them to introduce comprehensive privacy laws on both the federal and state level. Some states in the United States have great privacy laws. Most do not. Over in Europe, they have some fantastic privacy laws that prevent companies from collecting and storing information about individuals. And I would love to see that happen here. These data brokers have really started to get out of control. And, having some laws that prevent that would be amazing. Once again, only give your data to trustworthy companies. Do a little bit of research, read the terms of service, read the privacy policy. And if you know that they are not going to protect your privacy or value it the way that it should be valued, don't use them. Try to find an alternative. A big one is to talk to loved ones and relatives about your privacy wishes and encourage them to rethink their privacy behaviors. To be honest, we are only as secure as our closest circle is. Anyone that knows about OSINT and goes into OSINT can tell you that one of the biggest privacy holes we all face is our parents on Facebook. Because you may not be on Facebook, you may not be giving Facebook your data, but your mom is. She's, bragging about how awesome you are to her friends and family, posting pictures from last Christmas. And they, you may not necessarily want that out there. So talk to your friends and family. Let them know that, hey, I don't want to be on social media. Before you share a picture, you should ask people, hey, cool if I post this? All right. Just asking for that kind of consent is a big step. And it's one little way that we can help make the world immediately surrounding us a little bit more private, or at least a little bit more informed and giving consent. As always, support orgs that are fighting for your privacy and safety. Obviously, EFF is a big one. Operation Safe Escape, definitely support them. These are companies that are doing their best to help protect your privacy rights and, help the world not devolve into a privacy nightmare as quickly as it seems to be. So, support them, whether that is donating your time, your money, your energy, buying a t-shirt, participating in a fundraiser, or right now, attending this sort of conference, supporting Operation Safe Escape, and supporting the share of knowledge. That's big. Here are some resources that I have found to be extremely helpful when it comes to making informed decisions about privacy-focused tools, apps, and services. Privacytools.io has a great list of alternatives to current social media, shopping, payment processors, search engines, anything that you can imagine. They have a good privacy alternative. I'm pretty sure they keep it extremely, up to date. But when I was on there yesterday, just making sure I had, some good resources to give to y'all, I did notice they had Session. They were still recommending the Session app, which has been absolutely torn to shreds this past week. That is not private at all. So maybe they're just a couple days behind. It has been a wild week. So either way, I still recommend them. They're fantastic. ssd.eff.org is a comprehensive guide to protecting yourself from surveillance that the Electronic Frontier Foundation puts out, and it covers everything from how to avoid facial recognition, having your face be stored in various databases, how to keep yourself safe at protests, to what to do in the event of a breach, various surveillance focused things that you may want to keep an eye out when you're out and about doing your daily thing. It's a really great guide, and highly recommend most anything the EFF puts out. They put out amazing work, and they're always very, very up to date on everything privacy, anti-surveillance, and security focus. So love EFF. Big props to them. And I highly recommend everybody sign up for howi'vebeenpwned.com. They notify you if you have been included in a data breach. It was real awkward earlier this year when I believe it was Have I Been Pwned? Got pwned. But it wasn't very much information. I know that they've taken a ton of steps to secure that. But either way, they are the only ones of their kind that are doing the work to let people know when their information is included in a breach, rather than finding out the hard way when, your accounts have been taken over. So definitely great resources. Some other resources that are speaking at this very conference, highly recommend the next talk. That is Shannon Locked On Your Life. She is the go-to privacy expert when it comes to, protecting your privacy and your security when dealing with especially things like stalkers and any sort of, online harassment, that sort of thing. She is amazing. Definitely stay tuned for her talk. And as somebody that worked to, fight image-based abuse for so many years, I know there's a talk, I believe it is tomorrow, and I believe Edna is amazing. She is really put in the time and effort to make, to become an expert on the various aspects of image-based abuse, and will be teaching you all sorts of things about that. So as far as resources, we do have a few right here in this conference. I know there's a ton of amazing talks, but those two really stuck out to me as somebody that is doing, a privacy focused thing. I hope I didn't overlap too much with Shannon's talk. I know she's directly following me, but I tried to keep it to solely the data economy and how to protect yourself from that. Anyway, I wanted to say thank you to Operation Safe Escape for having me, and to everyone out there that's paid attention to me talking and just yapping for the last hour or so. You can follow me on Blue Sky at metasphere.com, and shameless plug, you should come check out Veilid.com to see how we all can work together to build a privacy-focused internet that we were promised. It's not too late. Don't feel overwhelmed or apathetic. Instead, it is time to start fighting back and taking back our privacy. We deserve to have control of our data, and that is something that we are working on with Veilid, and everyone can help. So check that out, my shameless plug. But thank you again for having me, and have a great conference.
Thank you so much, Katelyn. I do think we have a couple questions that have popped up in one format or another. So thank you. That was great. One thing that I always appreciate about Veilid is the advocates in the space and the attendee space will appreciate this, is they've taken a lot of time in order to try to understand the needs of the survivor space. So in terms of how they can create a solution without introducing new problems. That's something that we see a lot. One problem is solved and new ones are created. Some engineers at Apple solved the problem of people losing their luggage and some other things by creating an AirTag, and then new problems were created. So I appreciate that Veilid has taken the time in order to consider the voice of the survivor.
Thank you. When Chris came to me with the idea for it, he was like, this could be the worst thing ever. But we want to figure out the way, we want to figure out and prevent the ways that it could be misused before we even build it. And I said, I have seen a lot of the worst the internet has to offer, and I am more than happy to help on that front. So hopefully we can continue to be survivor focused and prevent, a lot of the awful things on the internet from happening over and over again. I see in the Q&A, somebody is asking about protocols like Matrix and how they could play into assisting with secure communication options. There's a lot of privacy focused protocols coming out right now, and I've been really busy building rather than focusing on what they're doing. As far as I know, Matrix is, it's great, it's secure. But one of the things that we are trying to tackle is that third point when I said, privacy shouldn't have a paywall, privacy shouldn't require a CS degree. It should be easy and accessible. One of the main beefs I have with protocols like Matrix is that they are only focused on privacy, and the user experience comes, later on. Like they just kind of tack that on, and it is not made a focus. The protocols that are coming out are not easy to use for most people, and they are not, approachable. Unless you are already very techno literate, they are going to feel overwhelming and impossible. And that's something that people just won't use. You have to make it easy. You have to make it seamless and painless, or else people aren't going to want to use it.
Yeah, for sure. And that goes back to what I was saying before about creating new problems, is in some cases when changes their behavior, if they're in a dangerous situation and suddenly they're using new tools that they probably didn't have access to before, know they had access to before, that can be a whole new set of indicators for the whoever's watching. So definitely a concern there.
Absolutely. And the data economy and the way that companies store, collect, and use the data is actually a huge risk, especially people that are, in bad interpersonal relationships, trying to leave a bad relationship. That data could possibly be out there to be held against them later on. So, I felt that was important to talk about and focus on just the very basic aspects of, keeping your privacy private.
Mm-hmm. Now you had mentioned the importance, I realize this is slightly off topic of your overall topic, but you said that it's important not to share passwords. And you said that about in terms of security and protecting your data and things like that. Why is it important to not share passwords?
When you say share passwords, you mean like sharing them with a partner?
I'm sorry, reuse passwords.
Reusing passwords is because if somebody is able to access one thing because of information they found a data breach, or just guessing your password, or they have somehow used something to crack it, and they know other bits of information about you, they know your Twitter account, they know your email address, they know your Facebook your Facebook login. If you have reused that password, they are going to try to use that same password to gain access to everything. Once again, it comes down to storing all of your eggs in one basket. If you're using the same password and you drop that basket, all of your eggs are broken. So highly recommend using different passwords for different websites. It's a hard habit to break, especially if you're somebody that does a lot of online shopping at different stores and you have to make it log in every time. And it's always kind of annoying to have to create a new password. But once you start getting into the habit of creating new passwords or using a password manager, that makes it so much easier. Honestly, the password manager has been a lifesaver, and it just makes it much, much easier to continue thinking of unique and difficult to crack passwords.
Great. And one more question came to me out of band is you talked about opting out services for data brokers, which I'm glad you covered that. Do you have any advice for avoiding your data going into the data brokers, or other ways that they can get your data out once it's there?
Some of them do offer services where you can opt out by going to their website and scrolling all the way down and finding the tiny print that says opt out, because they don't make it easy. Obviously, that's their bread and butter. That's their money. They don't want you to have easy access to opt out, but many are required to do it by law. But the fact is, when it comes to how they collect that data, most of it is in unavoidable ways. For instance, many states publicly share voting records. If you want to participate in a democracy, you're automatically subject to having your name and address in a public internet. And that, to me, that's an easy trade-off. Obviously, I want to vote. But the risk is there. And a lot of data brokers scrape that kind of data. And they store it. And so it's very hard to avoid getting your information not swept up in how they collect it, just by living your life. But like I said, doing things like reading privacy policies of various websites, checking their terms of service, seeing what they are doing with your data, doing a quick Google search to make sure they haven't been caught up in any breaches or haven't had, a big flashy Cambridge Analytica moment like Facebook had, can do a lot as far as, keeping that data out of the data broker's hands.
Awesome. Well, Katelyn, thank you so much for spending your time. It was a really fascinating and important topic, and appreciate you.
All right. Thank you so much for having me, and I hope y'all have a great PROTECTCON.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so we're